A few weeks ago, there was a little bit of an uproar on Ethiopian social media because of Yared Nuguse. So Yared Nuguse is a Ethiopian-American track star, and I believe he won s- some sort of race or he broke some sort of record. And a little bit after that, he had come out on his Instagram page as being gay. And, I'm a Christian and specifically an Orthodox Christian, so, I don't need to get into my views on this, which you can already assume, but this brings me to the question I asked in my last video of was it worth it? Was it worth it for your children? And I'm speaking to um, the Ethiopian parents who either had their kids or moved their kids to the West. Was it worth it to have that opportunity to have a materially better life uh, when viewing all of the social maladies that a lot of diaspora children have to face living in the West? Because this is a common thing. You can talk to any any Ethiopian kid, and if they're mature enough to discuss the issue, they will basically tell you that they have had some sort of identity crisis growing up in the West because you have all of the cultural expectations of being an Ethiopian when you're growing up in an Ethiopian household, but you don't have the environment to support you in doing that because in the house, you'll eat Ethiopian food. You may or may not speak Amharic. You are expected to maintain certain customs and behaviors, deference to authority, to those older than you, um, you know, practice your faith, whether, that could be Orthodox, Bente, Muslim, you're expected to maintain your faith tradition. But then most of the day, the other 10 to 18 hours a day, you're living in the outside world. You are expected to be an individual. You are speaking in English or whatever language you're speaking. Um, you're expected to um, adapt and assimilate to the culture you're growing up in. So when that happens, there is so much pressure because you have to balance these two identities. And when you're in Ethiopia, parents can be lazy. You don't really have to maybe teach your faith as much. You obviously don't have to teach the language because the surrounding environment will do the teaching for you. But when you're in a Western country, parents have to take a much more active role to instill certain values um, and beliefs. Because if they don't teach them those things, someone else will instill their values into them. And so I ask again, was it worth it? Because most parents are not going to be able to put as much effort as they want into instilling these sort of values into the children because they have work, they have their own stresses, and um, a lot do their best to maintain the culture, taking their kids to church, cooking Ethiopian food inside of the house, trying to connect their children with family back home. So it's not to say there is no effort, but um, it's 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 so difficult that eventually um, and this is normal, but the culture that the child is brought up in will eventually overtake whatever culture is a part of their ethnic identity. So this is something that you know has to be thought about, and I don't think most people do think about this because when they get the opportunity to move out of Ethiopia, It is solely a material concern. The thought is, let's get out of here. We're going to have a better life. It's just assumed we're going to have a better life. And let's assume that the family does become materially successful. I mean, there are a lot of stories where, as I've said before, that a good portion of Ethiopians that come here are working service related jobs. Um, in whatever countries they're in. They're not in high level positions. There are a lot that are. There I know many people who have advanced themselves, but let's assume they come to the West and do materially well. They are not looking at the social costs. Um, there's a verse in the Bible that says, "Man does not live on bread alone." Okay, you can have money, you can be you can have a car, you can have a house, you can have all these things, but there are things you're giving up in the process. Whatever negatives there are in Ethiopia, you know, um, th- something I always see is that, people actually tend to be happy, you know, and this is not to say that mental illness doesn't exist. There aren't social problems there, but people just have this sort of, they have this way of getting along and, moving forward in life, and they seem generally happy. Whereas in the West, people have all these material goods, but we have a mental health crisis. You know, uh, People casually talk about how depressed they are. So I don't think a lot of times when people contemplate or try to leave Ethiopia, they don't understand until they're actually here what sort of problems they're trading in for the ones they have back home. And I think people now have started to realize that living in the West is not as hyped up, or it's not as amazing as they thought it would be. So, people have different opinions about this. There will be many, especially people from Ethiopia who are still in Ethiopia right now, who say, I don't care. I'm willing to give up that culture because I'm tired of living in poverty, or I'm tired of living a life that has no upward mobility. So i- i- th- that's That's again, it's still an open question, but I think um, this is something that hopefully people back home will start to think about when they see the problems that exist in the West, and I think that is currently happening because of social media. Um, you know, Both the good and bad can be openly seen right on your phone. So I don't know if that'll change anybody's mind, but, um, yeah.